as the south side comes in. But some of you, again, as this winds down, don't be surprised, Mike, to get some gusts up to 90 miles per hour, even on the dry side of this.
Yeah, I think it's very possible. You know, one thing I'm certainly concerned about, Jim, when I look at how much rain is coming with the north side of this storm, is how many places will have really heavy rain and then potentially even some trees that come down with the gusts that come in, because a lot of these places had 6 to 8 inches of rain, so the soil is just loaded with water right now, and the root systems are weakened. All right, we've looked at Jennings, we've looked at Breaux Bridge. Let's take you to Lake Charles, and our Justin Michaels is there. Justin, describe the conditions you've had here over the last couple of hours and what they're like right now.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mike, we just got an update. 9.07 inches of rain has fallen in Lake Charles, Louisiana, because of now Category 1 Hurricane Delta. That is not good news, because this area was still really laid to waste by Laura just 43 days ago. There were enormous piles of debris all over Lake Charles, Louisiana. We've had 95-mile-per-hour gusts. The most recent was a 79-mile-per-hour gust. And what's that going to do? That's going to pick up that debris and disperse it all over the place. People who decided to go out in this storm, let's hope it was zero. Let's hope people stayed in, the ones who didn't evacuate. But those types of debris can turn into projectiles, which can absolutely be deadly. We're standing here right along the banks of the Calcasieu River, and it looks like we have these two ominous eyes out there in the storm. Delta is looking at us, and you can see, well, what are those? Those are actually wells. Those are oil wells, and they light those on fire. And believe it or not, those are two burning eyes out there in the ethos beyond us and beyond the Calcasieu River. It's kind of eerie if you take a look behind me. But the scarier thing about this is the wind that has come through, the amount of rain that has come through, and the devastation that's being caused, the continued devastation. Jim was talking about the COVID effects here, people not being able to get roofing materials to repair their homes after Laura. That's going to be a huge issue. And I think that's a really good observation by Jim, that are they going to be significantly worse off after Delta here in Lake Charles than they were after Laura, because of how weakened the infrastructure and the homes and things were here after Laura, and not being able to repair as much as they'd like to? It's certainly a probability. We're going to be going out tomorrow to bring you stories from the ground here in Lake Charles, Louisiana, as people will undoubtedly decide to come back. And we do know tens of thousands of people evacuated yesterday, many people sitting in 8-10 hours of traffic just to head west, get to Houston, Texas, and get out of Dodge before Delta came, because the number one adjective we heard from people as this storm was approaching and they were getting that final gear and trying to get out of here was that they were scared. Laura scared them, and they didn't want to see what Delta had in store. They were scared enough to leave their homes and get out of here. So they're going to be coming back, and we're going to be talking to them over the coming days. We do know in Louisiana right now, we're pushing the 200,000 customer mark as far as power outages just in this state. 192,000 customers without power so far. More than 250,000 customers between Louisiana and Texas without power. And those numbers, every time I check, go up by tens of thousands every single time I check. It's going to be a tough go, and in fact, we just lost light, the entire hotel, and our lights are without power. I'm sorry, you can't see me right now. Here they come back. And what happened right there was the generator for the hotel just kicked in. So power outages are a major problem here. Let's go right now to Jennings, Louisiana. That's where Stephanie Abrams is. I'll tell you what, Steph, the winds are whipping, the rain is continuing to come down, and even though we're on the western side of this thing, Delta has been a fierce, fierce storm in Lake Charles. Steph, to you now.
Yeah, you know, what we're doing is I'm getting into our safe spot, because, you know, it's dark and we're hearing things break, and we're not quite sure where it is. Or, oh, there we go. Look at those. The boards came down, Matt. Do you see? Okay. Did it smash the window too? The window's smashed out. I can't tell from my perspective here. I have to walk across the street here. But you saw those boards. We were showing you how the windows are broken. Okay, the windows are broken to this business, and it had boards on it. So when we tell you that a Cat 2 does damage and is strong, this is what we're talking about. And those are the boards on the ground, guys. That's scraping. That's the sound we hear. Look at that right there. So we are now out of the worst of the weather, yet we're still seeing some debris get tossed about. And so this is why it is still dangerous. And we want to show you what it looked like during the height of the storm. This is the worst weather we have seen by far. Remember, this is a Category 2, so never let your guard down, even if you have a Category 2 making landfall. So there's some of the damage, and we've been right in the same vicinity all night and all day. You still hear some of that glass. I'm not sure if you can hear it breaking or not, but I don't see any significant structural damage. I don't have any to report at the moment. Now, has there been some, in a neighborhood a little bit away from me? It's possible, right? Because this is what we're seeing. And remember, these were boards that were put up. And so it's unlucky that those crashed down and you can hear the alarm going off. That's the alarm that has been sounding as well. We're getting into the eye, which usually is pretty calm, but again, because this hurricane is not a super well-defined hurricane, the eye is getting sheared apart, it's not going to be that perfect eye and seeing those clear skies. But let's talk about the pressure. I know you've been following along here. Matt, are you able to read this when I hold it up like this? You are. Okay, so I started my shift here at 5 p.m. Eastern time, and I checked my anemometer and it read 991 millibars. And right now we're at 977, and the lowest pressure in the hurricane is 971. So this is a good indication that we are near that center or nearing it. It's pretty interesting to watch this continue to drop. Remember, we were just talking to Bettis, and we were in the 980 range. So it is dropping, it's continuing to do that, but because of all of the shear and it's weakening, we still are going to be a little bit breezy in the eye. And in fact, down to 976 here. Jim, this eye is pretty stretched out, and it's going to continue to get stretched out. Do you believe you'll get that eye in Breaux Bridge? I have not had a chance to actually check out the radar for a bit.
No, I mean, we're getting what looks like is happening here is we're getting kind of the unraveling. You throw a stone in a pond and you see the wave ripple out from that stone. That's kind of what's happening. So we're seeing that, that kind of an outer band of the eye wall come through Breaux Bridge right now. It's knocked out power. And Steph, I don't know if you read this, as long as I still got you. There's been so much stuff, the superlatives of the season, the storm, are just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I think, isn't sub 980 a record October low pressure for Louisiana? Did you remember reading anything like that?
I just confirm that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. We'll have to look
I know. You're like me. I mean, we read so many things.
We will do that shortly, quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll try and get that back to you guys. But I think something sub 80 is maybe a record low pressure for October in Louisiana. Either way, it's a nasty storm. It's got rain. It's got the wind that Steph went through with that northern eye wall. Well, it was still pretty solid. Some of the strongest winds where she was in Jennings and then back on the backside of Lake Charles. Finally a calm in Lake Arthur. So, Steph, there's promise coming your way from the south. All right, so hang in there. Right now, winds whipping through Breaux Bridge. We have lost power in through here, and we are now up over 250,000 customers without power, most of these in the state of Louisiana, as Delta, the first hurricane with a Greek name, makes its way into the United States, landfalling right around 6 o'clock local time in Creole, Louisiana. What a year it's been there. Holy smoke.
Domino's.
And just like that, the rain and the wind are gone. all right, at least for the moment. So we'll see if that continues here in Breaux Bridge. It's interesting. I mean, we were getting hammered just a second ago, and you go to a commercial break, come back 5 minutes later, and now it's gone. But what's really interesting is there's a lot more wind now without the rain than what we had earlier. And I was just talking to my buddy Forrest Masters, who's down in Cameron, Louisiana. He's still seeing winds of 85 to 90 miles per hour in the area where it's dry and there's no more radar echoes showing up. So let's learn from that and realize that even when this goes by, we may still have some very, very strong winds. I mean, this is a deep low pressure. By the way, Mike Seidel cleared up the pressure question pretty quick. Mike is like one of the best statisticians I've ever met in my life. He gets stuff like nobody I've ever met before in my life. So what he got was Hilda on October 3rd, 1954, with a pressure of 950 millibars. So that's the lowest October pressure for Louisiana. It will not be this 970, whatever it's going to be verified as with Delta. So either way you slice it, we're still dealing with a hurricane tonight. In this case, we're dry at the moment here in Breaux Bridge. Lost power about 7 o'clock. Landfall officially, guys, if you're just joining us on the Weather Channel, Creole, Louisiana, about 6 o'clock. Local time. So Mike Bettis, kind of amazing where some of the highest wind gusts that we've seen, 96, Lake Arthur, not surprised because that was the northern eye wall. But how about Lake Charles at 95 on the west side?
What's interesting, I'm trying to figure out, Jim, why this happened is what I'm looking at, upper levels here. The only thing I can find here is we've got a little bit of a maximum wind at 850 millibars, okay? So we go up a couple thousand feet, and right on the western side, maybe interacting with the western side, we're getting a pretty decent north to south wind at 850 millibars. So there might be some interaction going on there that's creating these surface winds that are pretty intense on that side, whereas we don't have that on the eastern side where you are.
No, it's amazing. I mean, because I really think like I was talking about with the stone and the rock earlier, the wave ripples out. I think that's what kind of happened out of the eye wall and through here. But holy smoke, I mean, we are just dead calm right now, Mike. This is
I think you're done,
weird,
Jim.
Actually,
I think you're done with the rain. I think you might
Seriously?
get a few spits of drizzle, and I think it's all lifting north of I-10 now. For you in Lafayette, in Jennings, Lake Charles, I think might be the last spot where the rain ends. But I think most of it is ending now as it goes north.
And Bettis, to your credit, you called that. You said that we're all going to be kind of drying out together here, which is really odd. But that's how we placed it. Either way, Mike, I got that smell going on. Sadly, which timber. So we've got some tree limbs certainly down. It's dark, can't see anything. We know we had a couple down earlier, but when that band came through. When that band came through, it was about 60, 70 mile an hour with the gust and the rain. So not surprising. We've got, certainly a little tree damage. I don't know the extent of it. I can just smell it with my nose. All right, let's go back to what is, I think, going to be the calling card of this storm. Amazingly, it's Lake Charles. So beaten, so battered, so bruised because of Laura. Now getting it again with this 95 mile per hour wind gust. Justin Michaels, what are you hearing in terms of the tarps, in terms of any kind of additional damage that's going on there? We saw the shot earlier with the daylight hours of the power pole down. What else can you tell us? What else can you add to the damage here?
There's a big gust right there, Jim. I'll tell you what we're hearing and what we're seeing on traffic maps is lots of roads in the area are showing up as red or black, meaning they're completely shut down. You have to believe there are probably some people out, and GPS systems are recording these roads as closed. So we have to know that there is probably debris, there are probably power lines, there's probably a ton of trouble across Lake Charles, Louisiana. Remember, we went into this storm, Hurricane Delta, with hundreds and hundreds of millions of cubic yards of debris still left in this city. Even though they picked up 1.5 million cubic yards of debris, there's still so much left, hundreds and thousands of piles of debris still to clean up. Some of them are taller than I am, and all of it is building material, trees, corrugated metal, you name it. This city was blanketed with it. So when you're talking 95 mile per hour wind gusts, 79 mile per hour wind gusts, sustained winds 30, 40, 50 miles per hour, all of that turns into projectiles and gets blown everywhere. And that's going to be a very dangerous, hopefully not deadly phenomenon here in Lake Charles as this storm rolls through. So what are we going to see tomorrow? We have to believe, well, the power's out. The power's out in our hotel. We have a generator in our hotel, thank goodness. But we have to believe the power will still be out. People are going to start to come back. we know that tens of thousands of people did evacuate. They headed west. Some people headed north, some people headed west, getting out of Dodge and doing what they could to save themselves and get away from Delta because they had to live through Laura, and they said they were never going to do it again. So people are going to start to come back to assess the damage, and we have to believe that it's probably going to be worse this time around because of how weakened the state of things were here after Laura. Homes without roofs, blue tarps providing any kind of protection. Jim was talking about COVID and how the roofing industry was really hard hit, not producing asphalt shingles and all sorts of different things, so people couldn't repair their rooms depending on those blue tarps, and then Delta comes to town. So it's going to be a story here, and it's going to be a long haul as people still try to clean up after now two really bad hurricanes coming through Lake Charles, Louisiana. Two is too many. Two is too many, right? We know the power outages are running rampant all over the place. Now up over 300,000 customers without power in Texas and Louisiana. Louisiana has the most, about almost 220,000 customers without power, and those numbers are going to continue to go up as these winds blow. The rain continues to come down. Now more than 9 inches of rain here in Lake Charles. We're back after this with more coverage of Delta.
Jake from State Farm. I would like to formally extend my gratitude for the Russell rate on my insurance.
Do you mean surprisingly great rates from State Farm?
I don't believe in accepting help, but I'll make an exception.
Here's the deal, Russell. There's no special rate. These prices are for everyone.
With the Oak and the Eagle as witness.
That pressure dropping. The lowest pressure is right at the center of the storm, starting off at 991 millibars if you're just joining us. And now we're down to 976.4. This is the lowest it has been officially. They're at 971. That's the official reading, 971. So we're basically in the center of this thing, and it's not a well-defined center. So I'll take this at 974. The pressure could go a little bit lower, but overall we're there because the eye is really stretched out. And as you can see, we're in what we call a dirty eye. There's still some misting. I don't know if you can see if the camera picks up or not on the misting. And it's still a little bit breezy too. So this is not going to be a perfect eye where you look up. It's still cloudy. I'm trying to see if I can see any stars, but it's totally cloudy. So that's not what this system is. And that's good news because that means it was falling apart. But it was cranking out here. And we're going to show you that video of just how bad it was. Remember, this was a Category 2. Our wind gusts here topped out at 81 miles an hour. Lake Charles gusting to 95. Lake Arthur, which is to our south, 96. And here's what's wild. Texas Point, Texas, at the Wildlife Refuge, it has been confirmed a 100-mile-per-hour wind gust. That's the highest we've seen. And it's interesting because a lot of times when you talk about hurricanes, that energy gets wrapped around on the east side of the storm, and that's where you see the worst of the weather. We did see, the water go up in the Louisiana coast up to 8 feet, but it's been on the west side that they've been getting hammered. Let's go to the west side of the storm and check in with Charles Peak, who has been riding this out in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And Charles, how has the last hour or two gone for you guys?
Stephanie, I've been a little surprised being on the west side, but we've had continual strong winds and even some stronger gusts, blowing a lot of the debris around, the sheet metal down the streets. Power went completely out in downtown here about 15 minutes ago, so still a lot of impacts here.
Okay, so let's talk about the rainfall because there's been a lot of rainfall, and in Lake Charles being on the west side, I would think the flooding that you guys got would be mainly from the rain that has come down.
Yes, Stephanie, most of what I've seen I would classify as flash flooding. This from rainfall in a lot of streets having a foot to 2 foot of water on them as I've been getting around.
Okay, so let's talk about the fact that there is a lot of tarps also on the roofs. Have you seen any homes? I know it's dark now, so it might be hard, Charles, but have you seen any homes that have lost their tarps?
Stephanie, throughout even earlier this afternoon, you started having many of the tarps being ripped off, businesses having them come off. Saw a bunch of piles of what looked to be the foam siding that you would put on the side of a building, and all those were being blown over and into the road, and additional sheet metal, additional damage on the roads, poles coming down, power poles, power lines down. So they've had more additional damage here with this storm, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's unfortunate too. Have you heard of any injuries or anyone needing to get rescued? Have you seen any emergency management out?
Now, Stephanie, for probably the last 3 hours, I've probably run across maybe 2 or 3 vehicles. Fortunately, nobody's out. I have not seen a single law enforcement or first responder out, so that's been good. Everybody's off the road.
That is good news, Charles. Thanks for that report, and we'll check back in with you as well. We want to go to Jim, and Jim, you know, I'm just getting a nice little gust right here. This eye, as we were talking about earlier, is a dirty eye, right? It's not a perfectly formed eye. But Jim, I don't know if you've been watching the pressure, if you have an anemometer with you. We're down to 975.8, so we're still dropping here in the center of circulation, which is elongated and getting ripped apart, and we're getting some upper level energy in it as well. So it's not this perfect scenario that we're used to. It's much more complicated with this system.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you, that's another little surprise. Besides the west wind being so strong on this, getting the strongest winds on the west side of this thing, that surprised me, really, getting these kind of wind gusts. You hate to see that, that's for sure, because you know there's an issue somewhere. But we probably had 60-mile-per-hour gusts roll through here in Breaux Bridge, but it doesn't take much to cause the power to go out, and certainly a couple trees. You can smell it. You can smell limbs that are down through here. It's kind of amazing, too, Steph, that you're seeing the pressure still going down. You would think, you know, obviously as the storm comes in, it starts to fill a little bit. It's not happening as quickly as what we might think. Perhaps an explanation, or part of the explanation, as to why even in the dry side of this, we're getting wind gusts that are still as high, let's say down in Cameron and Vermilion Parish, still getting some 80s and 90s. So the moral of the story here for you, Stephanie, is maybe we'll see the winds pick up again, this time from a southwest flank coming into you. So we'll see. Either way, we're up without power here in Breaux Bridge. Mike Seidel says we haven't even gusted yet over 50 miles per hour at the airport in Lafayette, which is on the southeast side of the city. So, you know, that's, you know, big difference, obviously, in where you are in relation to that eye wall, which is, you know, continuing to collapse as it moves north. But there's a lot of wind energy with this. And now it's interacting with the mid-latitude jet that we get in fall. So, again, expect a lot more wind than what you might think. It's pretty low pressure, all right, coming ashore at 970 millibars. We'll be right back. Antarctic Activity coverage of Delta coming ashore 6 o'clock Central Time. First hurricane to make landfall with a Greek name, with the alphabet of the United States. Pretty amazing season it's been, and it's not over. You remember the whole season goes till November 30th. So it ain't done till it's done, right? So you're looking at live pictures from Charles Peak, who is in Lake Charles. And if you're just joining us, we've been talking about how the storm coming ashore near Creole, but we had so much wind on the west side of this. All right, Texas City, 100 miles an hour at the Texas Wildlife Refuge there, incredible. 95 at Lake Charles, worst case scenario. They had a couple of times where their winds were sustained over 60 miles per hour. And just imagine what that's doing to the thousands and thousands, or I should say what it's done to the thousands and thousands of tarps that are on people's roofs over there. So just a horrible, horrible situation. Charles mentioned he is seeing new power lines down. He is seeing new wires down and even new damage to report in the Lake Charles area. So certainly that may be the calling card of this. But Mike Bennis, let's talk about this. Speaking of Laura and the damage that caused, a similar storm surge as we kind of look at this time lapse of Vermilion Bay near Abbeville. Getting up to 8 feet.
Yeah, pretty interesting. We got record-setting surge that's happened for us here, actually eclipsing Ike. Now, Ike was a little bit different storm, hitting a little bit farther to the west over in Texas, but still, when you look at this water come up and you see it come and inundate the buildings here, then you also see the wave action that happens on top of that. But I think just the angle that it came in, the location, Jim, and really being right in the right front quadrant, I mean the exact spot to maximize the surge, and this is what you get.
Well, you remember when this thing was a 3 and a 4, so it was pushing all that water up. We saw the buoy this morning, 42002, have a wave height of 33 feet. So, again, that water doesn't go away certainly as quickly as some of these other things.
No.
And you saw the result of a pretty high water rise there.
What I'd say was super interesting about this, Jim, is it didn't even happen at high tide. Imagine if this had happened at high tide, which
Yeah.
happens later on
True.
tonight, it'd have been even higher. Now I think we're going to start to see it back off a little bit as the storm comes ashore here, but it was pretty impressive to see, and now we've got a record setter in Louisiana.
Well, I got to tell you, Mike, this is kind of interesting. We're behind this thing with no precip now, but we're seeing so much leaf debris blowing around right now. I mean, there were some pretty good gusts when that little piece of the eye wall came through here. It's what pretty much kicked out the power. We don't have any rain. We are completely rain-free. A couple of drops here and there, but the wind is still kicking up, and you can smell, the timber. You can smell probably pine that's gone down here. And, just to remind everybody that we had historic timber damage to the state of Louisiana from Laura. And this is going to add to that. It's going to lay down the sugarcane. And I was talking to a sugarcane farmer earlier, Mike, and how he was telling me, how it's different from corn. The sugarcane will lay down in storms like this, but you can actually bring it back up and keep harvesting it. When the corn lays down, it's done. It's done.
Yeah,
so
it snaps.
A little bit of good news there.
I'm going to show people, Jim, and stay with me here because I'm going to show the radar because you're going to be really close to the eye, all right? I'm going to circle where Jim is. He's right here outside of Lafayette and Breaux Bridge. But I'm also going to kind of outline about where the eye is. It's about right there, okay? So the movement is going to be off in this direction. So, Jim, you might actually stay in which is just bizarre, you might stay in a dry eye wall or just barely get in to the eastern eye of this thing. It's just really, really close, but it's just an oddball kind of storm tonight.
Yeah, and I mean, we do is on the way of collapsing. I mean, how do you deal with 60 knots of surge, Mike? I mean, that's what this thing got hit with, and that is going to cause big time changes in the structure. But that wind energy, interesting to go through an eye wall with dry weather, but yet still some very, very gusty winds. And I think even when we get on the south side of this, and that's kind of a testament to this, even though the precip ends, we're still going to get some gusty winds out of this. They may not be as bad as the northern eye wall and certainly what Steph went through, but I still think it's enough to cause some additional power outages.
Oh, definitely,
all this
Jim.
Obviously heading north toward the I-10 corridor.
You think about how much rain we've saturated Louisiana with, anywhere from 6 to 10 inches of rain. So the ground is really soaked right now. Now you're still going to see gusty winds that are over 75 miles an hour. Easily, you're going to bring down some trees. You're going to snap some limbs. You're going to bring down some power lines. So I think we're going to have some power outages that'll extend beyond I-10. Could go maybe as far north as I-20 even.
I think you're right. I think you're right on that. There's a lot of wind energy with this. Hey, Mike, I want to bring in Steph because I want to see how it's changed for her. So we've really kind of spaced everybody out, folks, if you're joining us. I mean, Seidel's to my west in Scott. We've got Lake Charles obviously covered because of the big story there. Steph's about 38 miles to my southwest in Jennings. She got into that northern eye wall in the much higher winds. Steph, I want to ask you again because you were talking about your pressure was still coming down. Is that still the case?
So we're down 976, Jim, 0.0, just looking down. I had written down on my notepad 976.2, so it's jumping around 976.2, 976.0. So yes, we have dropped since I last spoke with you, but we're probably going to level out here. I don't know that we're going to see a more significant drop from that. But Jim, I want to also show the viewers behind us. Let me move out of the way so you can see what's happening. I don't want to block the light. This shop was boarded up. And somehow the wind got under the boards, ripped them off, broke all the glass in there. And you see that these gentlemen are here to board this back up. And so they are going to take care of that so that they don't obviously have anyone going into their shop and whatnot. The things are much calmer here, and our highest gust 81 miles per hour. But in and around Lake Charles, they are experiencing flooding. They've had a gust of 95 miles an hour. Flooding, power is out. Power is out to over 200,000 customers between Texas and Louisiana. We're going to take a quick break.
Is that?
Thank you for staying with us as we continue to track Hurricane Delta live here on the Weather Channel. I'm Justin Michaels in Lake Charles, Louisiana, where we now have a flash flood emergency in place. The National Weather Service just sent that across all of our cell phones. Power outages are running rampant here in Lake Charles and also across most of southwestern and southern Louisiana. More than 225,000 customers are without power in this state right now. More than 100,000 customers in Texas alone as well. So we're talking more than 325,000 customers without power, and we have to believe those numbers are going to continue to go up. The power is out in our hotel. We now have a portable generator. It is outside. It is not inside. If you're using a portable generator and you're listening to the sound of my voice, watching the Weather Channel, make sure that generator stays outside of your house, not even in your garage. It needs to be outside because you can have catastrophic results if you don't do that. As far as numbers here in Lake Charles, Louisiana, we have had a 95-mile-per-hour wind gust here today. That's the height of the storm, and the number one that we've had, 95 miles per hour. We have more than 9 inches of rain has fallen here in Lake Charles, Louisiana. These are terrible numbers for this city that was already reeling because of 43 days ago, Hurricane Laura coming to shore, decimating this city, causing so much trouble. People haven't been able to get roofing supplies because of COVID. They're not making the shingles and the products they need to get these roofs put back up and get people back on their feet. So many people had blue tarps. We have video coming in from our fields here, or for our crews here in the field safely. They captured video before the sun went down of blue tarps flapping in the wind and lots of trouble around Lake Charles, Louisiana. We do know that tens of thousands of people evacuated Lake Charles because of fear. They were scared of what Delta might bring, so they headed west all the way to Houston, Texas, to try to get away from this storm. We know tomorrow morning, after the effects of this storm have pushed off to the northeast, we know people are going to want to come back and reassess. What are they going to find? Well, Lake Charles, they were able to clear more than 1.54 million cubic yards of debris out of this city in the last 6 weeks, but there was still so much more to clean up. And now we have insult to injury, Delta coming to town and possibly laying another major blow. We know it's going to be pretty bad as we head out tomorrow. Our crew is going to be doing storytelling across Lake Charles and this entire region, as the stories are going to be really horrible. People are going to come back and find out that all the progress maybe they made over the last 6 weeks was completely wiped away as Delta came through. The winds have been intense. The rain rates are intense. We have that flash flood emergency in place right now in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And Steph, in Jennings, Louisiana, I can tell you, Steph, conditions here, they might have inched a little bit better, but we are still getting intense rain and intense gusts of wind coming through here. We're on the western side of the storm, which is typically not as bad as the eastern side of the storm. But I'll tell you, Steph, It is no day in the park here in Lake Charles.
So let's talk more about, you were saying inches, and actually we're measuring in feet now when it comes to this storm just to the east of Lake Charles, where Justin is located. We have the Calcasieu police reporting a rain gauge, 16.5 inches of rain. In Lake Charles, a daily record of 9.07, and there's more falling, as you can see in those live shots. I know Justin mentioned that flash flood emergency, and if you go in depth with that flash flood emergency, what it tells you is it's eastern Calcasieu, western Jefferson Davis Parish. We're in Jefferson Davis Parish, but it's going to be west of here where we see some of those heavier totals. 4 to 10 inches is what the warning is reporting has fallen, and we could see another 2, maybe 6 inches of rain before all is said and done with this. And that's going to be a big story with those of you who are watching us as this storm moves inland. Our winds, as you can see, have calmed down, and I've been following the pressure reading to see if we've gotten any lower. Let me look real quick. 975. So, you know, our pressure down to 975.6. And that's the lowest we've had. 976.2 was the last thing I wrote down on my notebook. So 975.2. That pressure is still dropping, and it will start to come up once the storm goes to our north, because being that we're in the center of it, that means that you're going to see the lowest pressure. Let's talk about some of these wind gusts we've had. 81 miles per hour here is what we had for the strongest wind gust. Shockingly, around me, there's still power, though I know they're between Texas and Louisiana, some 200,000 customers without power. Lake Charles gusting to 96, And Texas Point, we're talking about the wildlife refuge there around Port Arthur, they gusted to 100 miles an hour. That's the highest gust we've seen so far. This system is going to continue to fall apart as it moves inland. So those of you watching us in the path as this is going off to the northeast into Mississippi and also into Tennessee, we have crews positioned to take you through the storm as it goes through. And then, of course, we will be with you after the storm. We don't just, forecast it and go through it with you. We are there for you after, and we continue to revisit communities and check in with them as well. Around here, overall, I have not seen any structural damage. Seems stop signs have flown off, bits of sheet metal have come down. We saw a stop sign that was in a huge planter that is knocked over. That's the type of damage that we're seeing. Now, I can only speak to where I've spent the last 4 or 5 hours here in this one little square block area. But as I look down the street, I don't see massive trees tumbled over, which is good news. We really have gone through the worst of it here. So as we go through the night, the conditions are going to continue to improve. It's not going to be raging anymore here. So that's the good news for this I-10 corridor. We'll be right back.
Thank you for staying with us live here on the Weather Channel. I'm Justin Michaels in Lake Charles, Louisiana, a city still reeling from Laura and now Delta. It is now 9 o'clock on the East Coast, 8 o'clock here Central Time as the storm continues to whip through. We have had 95-mile-per-hour gusts. We have more than 9 inches of rain here in Lake Charles, and it's still blowing around, folks. You're taking also a look at video coming into us live as our Charles Peak is out showing us images of Lake Charles, Louisiana. We have to believe when the sun comes back up tomorrow, the damage is also going to be extensive. Could it be worse than what we saw after Laura now 43 days ago? Well, you have to believe that it probably will be. Power outage numbers are mounting. We have hundreds of thousands of customers here in Louisiana and also in Texas are still going through this night without power right now. And if we go over the last 43 days here in Lake Charles, where cleanup was happening, big issues related to COVID, people not being able to get roofing supplies and building supplies to try to bring their houses back from Hurricane Laura. Now we have Hurricane Delta. So the temporary patches, the Band-Aids, if you will, that they used over the last 6 weeks to try to get their houses prepared for now another hurricane, they are not going to stand up to this kind of wind. 95-mile-per-hour gusts, 79-mile-per-hour gusts. That's what this storm has done here in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Not to mention the amount of debris that was on the streets, pile after pile, street after street, all across Lake Charles. Debris that was not picked up between Laura and Delta. That's not because Lake Charles was delinquent in their work. They picked up 1.5 million cubic yards of debris in just 6 weeks. But there is still so much more to pick up, and so many dangers if you were going out this evening. And the number one thing you can do is not go out tonight. Stay indoors. Wait for this storm to completely push off to the northeast. And we know there's probably going to be a mass return tomorrow as people coming back from the west, coming back from Houston and other points west, are going to want to come back to their homes and their businesses and see what exactly happened here because of Delta. We know so many people left because they were scared. Now they're going to want to come back, reassess, and try to figure out how to move on now again after another hurricane, Laura and Delta. So we're right along the Calcasieu River. I know it's difficult for you to see it back there. Lake Charles itself is not far from where I'm standing. Off to my left, your screen right, is Lake Charles right up there, the actual body of water. And the city is basically also off to your screen right as people will eventually come back in. The east is that way. So, Steph, I'll tell you what, someone else to the east, Stephanie Abrams, Steph in Jennings, Louisiana. The wind, Steph, my goodness gracious, are they still whipping around here in Lake Charles? The rain is still coming down. I'll tell you what, it's time for a reprieve here in Lake Charles. We know it's coming, but it can't come soon enough, Stephanie Abrams.
Yeah, we've gotten that little bit of a break here. I mean, much different than just a couple hours ago when we were in the eye wall. And we're going to be able to show you what it was like to go through the eye wall. And it can just remind you that when we say there's a hurricane coming, it doesn't matter if it's Cat 1, Cat 2, or if you are in the eye wall, you will get damage. Right around us here, we don't have a lot of structural damage. There were some boards that went flying and stop signs and whatnot. We had our wind gusts to 81 miles an hour. There's no significant flooding that I can see. Now, in western Jefferson Parish, there is a flash flood emergency. Also, eastern Calcasieu, they're in a flash flood emergency. 4 to 10 inches of rain, and I want to bring in Jim Cantore to talk about the rain totals. Jim, we're just starting to get some in. We got a report here. I wrote it down to make sure I have it right. 16.5 inches. The Calcasieu police jury there, just east of Lake Charles. They said that was on a rain gauge. And I believe that because in Lake Charles, they're still getting rain, Jim. I don't know if you've heard these numbers yet. 9.07 so far in Lake Charles. And so it wouldn't be out of the question to have that 16.5 just east of Lake Charles, since the flash flood emergency is 4 to 10, another 2 to 6 could fall.
We got to buy into that, Stefan, and I would, but that's a lot of rainfall, no question about it. We've certainly got flash flooding all over the place, which is now expanding up toward Alexandria. We're still gusting here. Very different. It's not like this persistent wind out of one direction. I mean, the wind literally comes and goes. It swirls around here through Breaux Bridge and then moves on. All right. Sometimes we'll get a little splits of rain, but otherwise, it's really like leaf debris, tons of leaf debris just kind of coming down the road here. I don't know what's going on here, guys, but we had about 7 police cars just race by us here, which is up toward the interstate there. Not really sure what's going on. Hopefully we'll find out. Hopefully it's nothing super serious. But, when 7 cars go rolling by you and a fire truck, it can't be good. We got word of a friend of mine who's actually here working with us that the old house he grew up in had a huge oak tree fall on it. So there are, gusts up here, 60, 70 miles an hour, that are taking down, trees. And it's the, the type of kind of just this pushing and building of the wind, Steph, that we're worried about. That certainly could continue tonight. And I'm really surprised, certainly even as dry as we are, a lot of this wind energy continues tonight. I want to bring in Dr. Rick Knabb, our hurricane expert, to talk a little bit about this. Rick, are you surprised to see some of the strongest gusts on the west side of this or not?
Well, Jim, this has always been a symmetric kind of system, kind of surprisingly in some ways. But, when you got a large hurricane like this, it doesn't necessarily, have a lot of one-sidedness. But in terms of one-sidedness, though, isn't it interesting how it has been kind of front-loaded because of the wind shear today?
Right.
That shear has kind of pushed a lot of the weather kind of upstream. And since it's kind of doing that in the same direction, both northwest and northeast, then I think that kind of evens the playing field for what the north half of the hurricane looks like.
Yeah, and that certainly makes sense. As you know, Dr. Knabb, they're all different, and they all present learning situations for all of us, to kind of, now I see that. Sometimes in post, you go in and you certainly see things like that. Guys, just to recap with you, if you're just joining us this evening, we know a lot of viewers certainly come and go. Landfall 6 o'clock near Creole. We've had winds in Lake Charles, sadly, at 95 miles an hour, many sustained winds over 60. We heard from Charles Peak earlier. He has seen tarps ripped off of people's roofs, thousands of tarps obviously there as they wait for shingles and wait for a repaired roof, which because of COVID is not happening. If you don't make the shingles, you can't put the shingles on the roof, right? And that's really one of the big issues there. And I'm wondering, certainly a lot of people that may have said, all right, well, I'm getting my roof maybe in 2 weeks. Let's start the inside project. Let's start fixing the inside where their tarp was over the roof, and now because of this, maybe missing it or maybe loosened, and may have, certainly put the house again in harm's way by getting water back inside, because we've had almost 10 inches of rain in Lake Charles, for goodness sake, on the western side of this. So incredible. Still very, very breezy, windy. We haven't had any persistent rain here in Breaux Bridge for hours, but we can hear the wind certainly howling through. We lost power about an hour after landfall, about 7 o'clock local time here in Breaux Bridge. But we really got what I think we were expecting here. A little surprising, like I was talking about with Dr. Knabb, certainly on the western side of this, and we're not done. And the system's still elongating and pushing up through much of Louisiana. We've got about 330,000 customers now without power between Texas and into Louisiana as well. So those numbers certainly have a chance of going up with the kind of wind, even in these dry areas, going to be very tough to get those buckets out. I'm sure a lot of these folks are going to wait till first light to get out, and then the winds start to die down a little bit because they're much too strong right now to get even near a bucket. So we'll keep you posted here from Breaux Bridge in Louisiana. Justin, let me know where I'm going here from this point on. But right now we are without power and ducting. Now let's go ahead and get an update actually on where this thing stands, where you think the center may be. Steph was talking earlier about how the pressure was still going down where she is. Do you think the actual center of this is by Jennings, or is it just kind of this elongated, low-pressure blob at this point?
I mean, that's the thing. It really is becoming a broad system. In fact, even the radius of maximum winds on the right-hand side and the whole storm surge component was very broad. This is not the focused kind of circulation that it was over the center of the Gulf of Mexico. Still a hurricane for the moment, but it'll be weakening wind-wise relatively quickly, but not quick enough to save northern Louisiana and western Mississippi from a lot of really gusty winds. And I wanted to highlight again what has happened storm surge-wise. We had the forecast from the Hurricane Center of 7 to 11 feet above normally dry ground there along the central portions of the Louisiana coastline, and that definitely seems to have happened. Now, right now, we can't get observations from the freshwater canal locks because communications went down and that isn't reporting anymore. However, we do know that earlier it got above 8 feet, highest that gauge has ever reported in terms of storm surge, higher than what it got in Ike. And higher than what it got in Laura. So every storm is different, isn't it? Calcasieu Pass got to 5.5 feet above normally dry ground. Now, when you look at where this all happened relative to what happened in Laura, remember that we had the landfall of the center at Calcasieu Pass. But in this particular case, we had the landfall of Delta at the same place where this 17-foot storm surge flooding was reported in Laura, where the radius of maximum winds was. So Delta came in farther to the east, and that created storm surge that was higher to the east as compared to where the highest storm surge was in Laura. And of course, this is a weaker system, so the peak surge isn't as high, but I think we're going to get something near 10 feet. But out to the east, way out to the east, 50 miles away from the circulation center, we got over 8 feet. And I think somewhere between Grand Chenier and the landfall location of Creole, we got probably something near 10 feet. And part of the reason why we got as much storm surge flooding as we did is that low tide was earlier in the afternoon, and we're headed into high tide, so we're kind of between low and high tide when all that happened. So it's a significant storm surge. And as the winds come in, then we're going to get a lot of power outages, but in the meantime, all that wind going inland is going in with a lot of rain, where we've had over a foot of rain just east of Lake Charles, and where our Justin Michaels is in Lake Charles, we've got the flash flood emergency. This is a really significant event. It's a little different than Laura. Not as much wind, but maybe a little more rain-induced flooding, Justin.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, that's a big concern, Dr. Knabb, as people will eventually be coming back here over the next probably 24 hours. I would imagine tomorrow morning people are going to wake up and say, we're going back, because of how much progress they were trying to make over the last 43 days since Laura. Now Delta probably wiping a lot of that away. I hope I'm wrong. But we're going to get into the city tomorrow and start talking to people about what they're seeing. Let me show you a little bit of improvement. Let's find the silver linings where we can, right? We are getting better and better visibility. Take a look at all the refineries across the Calcasieu River. We can now see them. Earlier today, it was a complete whiteout. So we're getting a little bit better visibility, but the winds are still strong. The rain is still coming down. Let's get on the phone right now and actually talk to Charles Peak. Charles, I know we probably have some video images coming from your camera. Tell me, Charles, people have reached out to me on social media asking about some of your images about water on the roads. How deep is the water that you've seen? I know you're not driving through it or walking through it, but how any way to gauge what you're seeing?
Yeah, Justin, in quite a few areas, you've got water on the roads as deep as 2 foot, 2.5 foot. I would say more broadly about a foot deep or so, but in the low-lying areas, I was a little surprised that you could have it that deep. But fortunately, Justin, I mean, there's almost nobody on the roads except me, so that's a good thing, as bad as that is. People aren't out here that accidentally driving into something that can get themselves in trouble.
That is good news, Charles. Now tell me, as you're moving around, I've seen images coming in from our Robert Ray. He's been out storytelling this afternoon. We see the blue tarps flapping in the wind. I know you've seen that and documented that. What are you seeing? Because you know people have in their minds about what their houses were like after Laura, any progress they may have made, and wondering, did it all get wiped away? What are you seeing on the ground as you move around?
Justin, it's going to be a case-by-case basis. In some of them, the tarps were completely ripped off, is what I saw. In other cases, they were completely intact. So I would say more of them intact than not. At least that's what I saw before it got dark, when it's harder to see. In the last few hours, we've had it get stronger and more sheet metal blowing around and those types of things as we've had some strong gusts. But the good thing, like you were just talking about, Justin, the rain is letting up. The winds aren't quite as strong as we had earlier, although there's still some strong gusts. But things look like they're going to be improving over the next few hours.
Well, and Charles, you brought that up, that metal blowing around. I know you've been driving around here for days. We were out the last couple days driving around. Those enormous piles of debris left over from Laura, even though the city did yeoman's work cleaning it up, 1.5 million cubic yards cleaned up over the last 6 weeks. There was still so much more to do. Are you seeing that debris spread across Lake Charles?
Yes, sir, and some of it, but it's been the lighter. I was honestly, and we talked about it, I was worried about those tree limbs and stuff becoming projectiles, and very little of that did I see. It's been more of the sheet metal, the lighter things, even with those stronger winds. So in that particular situation, from what I've seen, it's been better than what we were fearing.
Thank goodness for that. All right, Charles Peak, please, please, please be safe as you cruise around. These are still dangerous conditions, folks. Charles is out in them to document them, but he is doing everything he can for his safety, as we all are here on the Weather Channel. Our team of 4 people, Mark Whaley, Daniel Lapham, and also Steve Dresner, they are staying safe. I am staying safe. We all go in. Safety is key. Make sure you're making good decisions, especially when you come back. The Weather Channel is coming back live right after this.
And we are here now in the center of circulation, and I want to bring in the mayor of Jennings, Henry Gwynn, who is joining us, and he's just getting out and about and find out what information he has about the town. So what is the latest that you know?
Right now we're in search and rescue. Y'all see me tonight because we had an accident on Main Street. Good friend of mine, Rusty Saunier. Glass broke, boards blown out everywhere. We really needed to come in and help them out and get that secured.
So how about tree damage on your way over here? Did you see any tree damage?
There is some significant trees down throughout Jennings. We don't have a confirmed count just yet. We're in the early stages of search and rescue. Fire department is getting significant phone calls for trees on homes, people isolated that need some help. So we're in full-blown search and rescue.
And how about power outages? Is it out in all of Jennings, or is it spotty that you know of?
It's isolated right now. There are some more significant areas than others, but I'd say roughly 50% of the town is without power right now.
What does the next 24 to 48 hours look like in Jennings?
Right now it's safety first. We want to make sure that all our residents are safe. We want to get to them. The wind has died down significantly, so it'll allow us the opportunity to do that. Next 24 hours, once daylight breaks, we're going to start the actual physical damage to facilities, kind of go from there.
Okay, let's talk about Laura real quick, because it seemed that your town took this very seriously. Do you think Laura coming in just a month and a half ago had something to do with that?
I think it was fresh on everybody's minds. Obviously, with the sheriff and the OEP director issuing a mandatory evacuation, kind of resonated with our residents. Our residents have been through this before. This isn't their first rodeo. So they know what to do. We're in a very close-knit community. Everybody knows everybody. That's why you saw such a quick response once y'all put Blackwater on TV. So it's good. We're in a good place. Again, we want everybody to be safe. So we're going to start that search and rescue right now.
All right, Mayor, we certainly appreciate you coming on and coming out here, standing in the rain for us. We really appreciate that. And, the thing is Jim, this town, as Henry was saying, it's just a close-knit neighborhood. And I don't know if you saw earlier, but essentially the business across the street from us, somehow their boards got ripped off and the glass broke out. And I'm telling you, they saw it on the Weather Channel. And Jim, literally trucks just zoom right into it, and it's all boarded up again. Right. And we see that in these communities. And it's one of the most touching things after you've been through horrific weather to see these communities jump in like this. And the guy who owns it, by the way, is out of town, saw it on the Weather Channel, and his friends just came over and boarded the place right up.
Stephanie, as you and I both one of these days put our careers to bed, I think we will both look back at all the wonderful people we've met along the way that have shared information, shared food, a conversation, anything like that. And it, certainly warms my heart, and I'm sure yours, just the wonderful people that we come across out here in the field. Your situation that you're describing is certainly one example in so many out there that we continue to see. So many things we don't even get to show you. So it's amazing, really, guys, and I'll never forget that as long as I live, especially here in Breaux Bridge. We're getting through it. We'll continue to get through it tonight. We've lost power as well as like Steph. We did not get the kind of wind she did. She was in the northern eye wall. We were east of that. We got a little ripple of that. So in other words, if you take a stone and you throw it in the pond, that ripple comes out. That's what we got. We got the ripple. She got the true, collapsing eye wall right over her. And as you kind of look down behind me here, it's been interesting to kind of watch this sign, this antique sign, because you can hear it. When you wave metal like that and slap metal around, you can really hear that thing. And when it was dark earlier, before we lit it, with our generators and our lights that we have here, you were kind of wondering where it was going to wind up, really. But so far, so good. I cannot see. Steph's talking about the kind of damage that she had. I cannot see any kind of structural damage, at least here in this four corner. But I will tell you right now, my producer, Mike Foble, was driving down the road, and there's tree branches coming down, wind. You can smell there is tree damage. It's just very, very apparent. There's leaf debris just kind of floating down the road from time to time. But we've really been void of any heavy rain now for about an hour. So, good news in that regard, but amazing some of the reports that we're getting in out of Cameron Parish in Iowa. I think it's called Iowa, 16.51 inches of rain. So incredible. Lake Charles itself, almost 10 inches now, if not at that or more. So lots of rainfall heading up toward Alexandria, heading up into West Tennessee, or west parts of Mississippi as well, and West Tennessee, and into southeast Arkansas. All this is moving north. We won't have the wind energy with it, but there'll be enough. So we do anticipate some sporadic power outages as this all kind of moves toward the north. Here in Breaux Bridge, we are without power as far as the eye can see. East, north, south, and west. All the way to the interstate for that matter. So tomorrow is going to be the day that a lot of those power outages now up roughly around 330,000, and that was about 20 minutes ago when I last heard that. So that's 330,000 customers. With the kind of wind that we have here, and of course the night, you're not going to see much happen. So just kind of hunker down here. It's going to be a night in the dark for many, and unfortunately a night continuing in the dark, as Justin's been talking about back in Lake Charles, where this area hit very hard with 95-mile-per-hour winds. Really shocked to see Texas Point, right there on the border between Louisiana and Texas, and the wildlife refuge, come in with a 100-mile-an-hour wind gust. Just incredible. So we did not have the rain. We have not had the 9 inches of rain, maybe 2-3 inches of rain through here. Settle was telling me we got Lafayette at the airport gusting at 59 miles per hour. We've had a little bit stronger, certainly here. I think upwards 60, 70 a couple of times, especially when that squall came through. But otherwise, again, no visible damage at this point. It is also completely dark. And the winds maybe a little bit, I guess in the last 10 minutes, dying down, but then occasionally you get a big gust, upwards of 50 miles per hour. and that's going to certainly add insult to injury in through here. Guys, much more to come as we continue to cover Delta, the first D storm in the Greek alphabet to come ashore.
Good evening from Lake Charles, Louisiana. I'm Justin Michaels, live for you here tonight as we're continuing to track Hurricane Delta, really causing a lot of problems across Lake Charles, Louisiana. Speaking of Charles, take a look at Charles Peak. He has some video off to my side here, and he's driving around, doing it very safely as he can, not driving through floodwaters and being very careful, but bringing us the images to document what's actually happening in Lake Charles, Louisiana right now, as Delta is continuing to pack quite a punch with intense winds. As we look at the conditions changing, oh my gosh, as we look at, that scared me, as we look at the conditions changing, the rain is starting to slowly stop. And an example of that I can show you, you can see the oil refineries off across Calcasieu River here. We can finally see them. Earlier today, completely whited out. So it's nice to be able to see the conditions getting a little bit better. We also do know there is flooding across the city on roadways, including I-210. If you're not familiar with the lay of the roads here in Lake Charles, Louisiana, you have I-10 that runs east and west, but there's a business route that connects in the east or west and kind of goes to the south side of the city and then back up again. That is I-210. It's kind of the main thoroughfare for people to get around this neck of the woods. We do know that that has water on it. Luckily, from Charles Peak's reporting, he hasn't really seen anybody out. That's the best news we could probably have for you all night here on the Weather Channel, is the fact that people have heeded the warnings. Anyone who didn't evacuate is staying in, but we do know tens of thousands of people did head west to evacuate Lake Charles, Louisiana. Because remember, this is a city that dealt with Laura 43 days ago. Now we have Delta today, and we have to believe that a lot of the work and the repairs that were made over the last 43 days between these two hurricanes may have just been blown or washed away. We hope that's not the case for the majority of people, but you have to believe when this storm came ashore and was packing Category 2 force winds that there's going to be damage here. And there was already so much damage after Laura. So we're going to continue to track this. We're going to continue to tell you the stories we can. Our crew is going to be out covering this live for you tomorrow to bring you the stories here in Lake Charles, Louisiana. How are people recovering after two really bad hurricanes in 6 weeks? I can't imagine what they're living through, but we're going to tell you those stories in the days to come. I'll tell you what, these wind gusts are really, really intense as they're whipping through here. All right, so we're going to send it back into Dr. Rick Knabb, of course, the former director of the National Hurricane Center. Dr. Knabb, you know something, thing or two about hurricanes. As far as us being on the southwest side of this storm, Dr. Knabb, I know you can see this. It is still blowing hard out here as far as these winds associated with Delta. How much longer is this weather going to last as it continues to push off to the northeast?
It's going to be a few more hours before you stop getting the tropical storm force wind gusts because, while it is a front-loaded system, you still got a pretty significant low-pressure area, and it's going to take a while for that to get far enough north that the gustiness subsides. But the front side, I think, was worse than the backside will be, at least in terms of the duration and the heavy rainfall. Let's take a look at what the ramifications of some of these winds have been in addition to the damage that could be caused. A lot of power outages, especially in the Lake Charles area and southeast Texas, and they're spreading northward, getting up into the Alexandria area, and that will continue to spread northward as the system moves inland, and maybe all the way up to Memphis, Tennessee, we could see some sporadic power outages. Look at up in Alexandria, gusting near 60 miles an hour recently. Baton Rouge still gusting to 44, and that western side has been pretty potent. Port Arthur still gusting over 30 miles an hour. But you see how front-loaded this is. So the front side of it has a lot more rain and wind, and so we've had a lot of rain already, even though a lot of you haven't even come close to seeing the center of circulation. The center of action in terms of the heavy rainfall has been on the front side of this, and in fact, look at all the heavy rain totals that are over a foot estimated by the radar up by by Alexandria, and then down in the Lake Charles area. If we zoom in there, look in the Iowa area just to the east of there, the actual gauge measured over 16 inches in there, and the radar over a large area approaching a foot. So it's the volume of water that's fallen in that area, and that's why we've got this flash flood emergency for a large area in the Lake Charles, Crowley, and Sulphur areas. And we've had numerous reports of water-covered roads throughout the Lake Charles area, even homes getting some flooding in the Moss Bluff area. So, so many reasons not to be out on the roads tonight. And this problem of the flooding is spreading northward. We do have a flash flood warning that's in effect for Bunkie and Alexandria, all along the I-49 corridor going up from I-10. Increasing problems on the roads is what we can expect. This warning goes till 2 o'clock in the morning local time, but some kind of warning might have to be extended beyond that time. And again, look at the radar estimates of over a foot of rain, and that's over a relatively large area where we've gotten at least 8 inches. So again, volume of water falling into this area, and it's still coming down really hard. These are hourly rainfall rates. Radar estimating more than 3 inches per hour. So our team of meteorologists, not just at the coast, but inland as well, covering every aspect of Delta. Please stay with us as our coverage continues.
Okay, Lima.
Guys, Delta continuing to work its way slowly on off to the northeast. They're slow enough anyway because the rainfall has just been intense. Alexandria down again just to the north of I-10, now back still in toward the Lake Charles area and across southeast Texas, as Dr. Knabb was talking about. And we still got a lot of wind with this thing. Essentially, there's no real eye, there's no circulation center to speak of. It's all collapsed, and it's just one big windy blob right now rolling around. And heck, we even get gusts here where we've been dry now for about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes of 50, 60 miles an hour. Seidel just told me that Lafayette Airport is gusted at 75 miles an hour. All right, they didn't even have any rain. So, I mean, they had rain earlier, but out of the rain, they already gusted to 75. So that's pretty good. There's a lot of strong winds behind this thing. And the other thing I'm seeing is a lot of cars that have been coming out now that the rain has stopped. Be careful, guys. You're still going to get trees and power lines down potentially with the kind of winds that we're getting. They're just as strong now, at least here, than when we got earlier. We've had a couple of 60, 75 mile per hour gusts as well, because all that has kind of rippled up through Lafayette. All right, let's talk about some of the pictures that we've seen today. Certainly the thing that stands out is Abbeville and Vermilion Bay getting that surge, the number one all-time surge there, 8.3 feet. And I was talking to a meteorologist, and he says, Jim, the gauge failed too. One of the gauge, so it could have actually been higher down there. That's the highest surge they've ever got. It beat Ike back in 2008, which is pretty incredible when you think of the size of Ike. But as Dr. Knabb was mentioning earlier, these are all different. These are all different. They got different components, and that wasn't even at high tide, by the way, that we got that. That's just water above normal dry ground. So here we are again, guys. We just talked to you, literally in almost a calm or a breeze, and here comes one of these squalls again. You know, with gusty winds. Got reports. You see the police driving around behind me. We had a scramble of police cars go. What we heard was that there was a tree that actually fell on a gentleman's camper. He was trapped inside. They removed him from that camper. All right. Justin Michaels, I want to bring you in from Lake Charles, because I think, again, the calling card of this thing is what has happened there. The strong winds on the west side, gusting to 95 miles per hour, several sustained winds, rainfall up around 10 inches. Describe for us, how you've gone from really horrible to even worse, which I can't even imagine down there.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Jim, something, I guess, looking at a silver lining, the rain is beginning to fall off. It's beginning to wane, but it is still really, really windy here. We are still getting these hurricane force gusts here in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and we know the power outages are continuing to tick up. Every time we check, it seems like it's maybe 10, 12, 15,000 more customers are losing power. And something we just witnessed, Jim, was kind of remarkable. Mark Whaley behind the lens, I want you to take a look at all of these oil refineries back here, and if you kind of look right in the center, there's a dead spot. Well, that was all lit up about 10 or 15 minutes ago. An enormous explosion happened. Some sort of a transformer that was not like the residential transformer at the end of your street. It lit up the skies in purple and green and all these colors, and now that entire section of oil refineries is dark. So not quite sure what exactly happened back there, but I'm glad we weren't over there when it did. And that's a good example of the dangers associated, in this case, a very large danger, but the dangers associated with this wind and storms like Delta. And what makes it worse, insult to extreme injury, is the fact that this city, Lake Charles, Louisiana, had to deal with this just 43 days ago with an even more powerful hurricane, Laura, coming through here, laying waste to so many people's properties, business or otherwise, homes. Blue Tarp City is what this was, and now they're going to have to come back in and do so much more cleanup work. Can you imagine going through all the painstaking effort to try to get your house back, only to have another hurricane come through, rip off those Band-Aids, and start over again? That's what thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people are going to have to do when they come back from the west to the east here in Lake Charles to assess the damage, probably for many people beginning tomorrow. We know that the roads here, many of them are still flooded. Charles Peak was telling us earlier today, some roads have about a foot, and there's that wind I was telling you about. Some have 2 to 3 feet. We also know that I-210, kind of the business route, the business highway to the south side of the city, we understand, Dr. Nab, that route also has water on the highway, so the problems still persist here. The winds are still quite intense, Dr. Nab, and I know people here in Lake Charles are going to wish 2020 adieu and hopefully not have another hurricane season like this for a long time to come.
Yeah, every hurricane is different, and this one will have its own unique personality traits that we will look back on, and a lot of it not very fondly. And we had another big storm surge event on the coast. It's just that it didn't happen in as many populated areas as happened with Laura, even though it missed Lake Charles with the storm surge. We got a Category 1 hurricane still, and again, it's very front-loaded with the weather, but we have had plenty of onshore winds that created the storm surge that Jim was talking about a little bit ago, and I wanted to show you where that all occurred. Now, again, the landfall and the track, I'll update the current track of Delta. It's east of where Laura went. So Laura went west of Lake Charles, and it got even stronger winds than they're getting with Delta's west side. That is still pretty strong. But the landfall locations were 12 miles apart. And interestingly, the location of Delta's landfall was the location of the maximum storm surge associated with Laura, because that was where the maximum onshore push was. In this case, the maximum onshore push was out in here. And we got about 10 feet of storm surge flooding, I think, somewhere in here, even though we measured a little bit over 8 feet farther to the east, up to 50 miles away from the center of circulation, 8 feet of storm surge flooding. So a big hurricane can bring big problems to the coast and inland.
Did your daily dose of everything weather?
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
All right.
And welcome back to our continuing coverage of Hurricane Delta coming ashore 6 o'clock local time. And, of course, beating up this area here in Breaux Bridge, which is about 40 miles inland, by about 7 o'clock. That's when we kind of lost power in through here. And I think it's out throughout the city and certainly many areas in St. Martin Parish. I want to bring in Chief of Police here, Rolly Cantu. He's going to talk to us about the situation here. I'm going to set this up and social distance properly here, as I'm being told. But let's talk about this, Chief. Thanks for talking to us. Power's out here. Was that about right around 7?
Around 7 o'clock, as the power went out. What we understand, there's a tree that fell on some major power lines off a street called Joe Tree and Railroad. Once this tree fell, knocked down all the power. A male subject was pulled out of the trailer and he was transported to the hospital. What I understand, he's going to be okay.
Good.
Overall, everything's going good.
And this is what you kind of anticipated,
yes,
isn't
sir.
it?
Yes,
we knew when it was coming in. We were talking about this. You were briefed on that. What's interesting is these winds now, even when it's dry, they're going to stay up for a good part of the night.
Yes.
The is power out,
yes, the power's
countywide, pretty much countywide? Or?
There are some sections in the parish that I understand that is still
I'm sorry, parish-wide.
Yeah.
I'm not used to saying parish-wide, but parish-wide, they still have some power on. Hopefully they'll be able to get that back up tomorrow. But as long as these winds stay up like this, you're obviously not going to have crews out.
Oh, definitely not. I think their policy, the wind has to die down up to 40 miles an hour, down to 40 miles an hour.
All right, well, let's hope the rest of the night goes equally well, sir.
Yep. According to what y'all telling us,
yes,
a couple of more hours.
Sun comes out tomorrow, my friend.
Yes, sir.
Rolly Cantu, Chief of Police here in Breaux Bridge, Louisiana. Again, just kind of giving us a briefing on what's happening. Nothing really unexpected here. Obviously, you hate hearing the fact that a tree fell on a gentleman's camper home, whatever, and he had to be transported to the hospital. But from what we're hearing, we understand he's going to be okay. But that's when all those police cars came by. If we were live during that, you would have literally seen about 7, 8 of them go in the row. Fire chief of police as well as the fire, kind of rolling on by here pretty fast to get to that gentleman. So all in all, not bad. It's exactly what we certainly expected, and the fact that the guy's okay is huge. All right, guys, again, seeing this squally weather just continue here in Breaux Bridge. One of the things that really stood out to us is those trees that are back there kind of in front of that building where that antique sign has been blowing around. Just amazing sound coming out of that. And when it was pitch black before we got a chance to light that with our generators, you never knew where that thing was going to wind up. And that is definitely the most eerie thing that we've had happening through here. Our gusts have been around 60, 70 miles per hour. Mike's been telling me the airport in Lafayette gusting to 75, so they've had a hurricane force gust there. Rainfall has been about 3.43 inches. That's a record for the day in Lafayette, Louisiana, so that's where the weather is. And now it looks like most of the wet weather is starting to move north of the I-10 corridor. So that's good news. That's taking to Scott, which is off to my west and off to the west of Lafayette as well. And you can see as the storm came in during some of the daylight hours, we weren't in the worst of it yet, and we weren't in the eye wall there. That's what Steph went through down in Jennings, and she's had to break down her shots tonight because of a natural gas smell in that area. Obviously, that's the best reason at all to get out of harm's way. Just get out of there entirely. But you can see some of the action that's coming on through that area earlier on in Scott. It got worse, as it did in Lake Charles, Louisiana. We actually gusted on the west side of the storm. Some of our higher gusts were actually on the west side of the storm, 95 miles an hour in Lake Charles. So, Justin, when we left you were mentioning how the rain was coming down. Tell me the wind is starting to come down a little bit, or has it not changed much?
No. Jim, in fact, while you were talking just there, we had a gust. It might be the worst gust we've had yet. It's one of those gusts that you've experienced probably 1,500 times. Where it comes through, it was even worse than this. Where it comes through, it takes you off guard, and you almost, you have to brace yourself. They keep coming and whipping through here, Jim. Definitely, Delta still has some more story to tell as far as this storm coming through and going to the northeast. But yes, we're on the west side, the southwest side of it, but my goodness gracious, the wind has been really intense over the last, hours and hours and hours. If anything, the rain is beginning to die out a little bit, coming back right now a little bit. I can tell you, observing what's been happening here for several hours, the rain rates have certainly fallen, but there are places that have seen over 12 inches of rain. We do know flooding is persisting all over Lake Charles, and there was a flash flood emergency earlier. I have to check and see if that is still in effect, but a flash flood emergency is a dangerous thing. We know residential streets, we know commercial streets around town, those secondary and tertiary roads, but also the highway. I-210 had water on it, flooding it. Now the good news is our Charles Peak He's moving around. You can see actually some images coming from one of his cameras showing a building with some damage. We know that that's going to be a problem all over the place, but he was telling us for the most part, he isn't seeing people out. He seems to be the only person out. That is some really, really good news as far as the state of affairs here in Lake Charles. Probably a good reason a lot of people aren't out is because so many thousands of people left. They evacuated, they heeded the warnings, and in fact the mayor here told us they believe more people left for this storm than for Laura. Of course, the Weather Channel is going to continue to tell these stories over the days to come as people come back and assess the damage.
Domino.
Thank you for staying with us live here on the Weather Channel. I'm Justin Michaels in Lake Charles, Louisiana, where Delta is still continuing to whip through with intense hurricane force winds. Also, rain is coming down, and in fact, over the last maybe 5 or 10 minutes, our crew was just talking. We think it's actually gotten a little worse. You know what, Delta? Keep pushing off to the northeast because the people here in Lake Charles, they need a break. People are still cleaning up after Hurricane Laura about 43 days ago. They're going to come back after this storm, hopefully starting tomorrow, and reassess the damage. You have to believe that people are going to come back and have more damage than they were expecting with 95-mile-per-hour wind gusts. We've had that today, more than a foot of rain, a tough go for so many people, and now hundreds and hundreds of thousands of customers are without power. We've actually been watching some major power trouble. Mark Whaley behind the lens. Now follow me from the left, your screen left to the right, and you can see all of those oil refineries, and then all of a sudden you get to an area that's completely dark. About a half hour, 40 minutes ago, there was a huge explosion there that lit up the whole sky, and then that entire section went dark. Follow me beyond those two stacks that are flaming right there, those two oil wells that they have on fire, and you keep following me to the right a little bit, and then you see a very dark area. Just during the last commercial break, right before we came back live to you here on the Weather Channel, we had another one of those enormous explosions that lit up the entire sky, and then that section of oil refineries went dark as well. That's not good news, because if oil refineries are having that kind of trouble and the infrastructure that they have in place, you can only imagine the other power problems there are all across this entire region of Louisiana. And we do know hundreds of thousands of people are dealing with that right now. Now, the good news is, as we send it back into Dr. Nab there at the Weather Channel HQ in Atlanta, Dr. Nab, we know thousands of people did evacuate. That is great news. They were scared. They weren't going to deal with what they dealt with in Laura. They headed west. They're going to start coming back, and they're going to come back to, in many cases, if not all cases here in Lake Charles, no power. That's some bad news. But Dr. Nab, for the people who did remain, and they're wondering, my goodness, when is this going to come to a stop? I have to tell you, Dr. Nab, the winds have not let up. They have been intense. Those gusts come whipping through here, and they're the kind of gusts you have to brace yourself as they're coming through. How close are we to the real backside of this storm where they might get a little reprieve here and we see the light at the end of this tunnel, Dr. Nab?
Well, you're about to begin the second half of the circulation. Now, the good news about that is it will be a lot less rainy. And because rain brings down momentum and energy from above, the winds will be weaker on the backside than they were on the front side. But it will take until the morning for the winds to completely calm down. And it's going to, that will hinder efforts to get the power back on and so forth. So got to be patient and be careful during the power outages as the system moves in. So you see how front-loaded it is in terms of the rain, but it was right-loaded, as they usually are, with the storm surge, the right-hand side, the onshore push. And we wanted to show you a video from Abbeville. I want to show you where that is. That's over here, way about 60 miles east of where the center came ashore. And that in that area, they had storm surge because you're in Vermilion Bay right here. And that allows storm surge to come over normally dry ground and get as far inland as a location like that. And also, if you go all the way over to east of Pecan Island, about 50 miles east of where the center came ashore, that's where we had 8 feet of storm surge flooding measured. So even though the center of circulation came ashore only 12 miles apart, that little bit of difference of where the center comes ashore makes all the difference in terms of who gets what storm surge, because ironically, the exact location where the center of Delta came ashore this evening, that was the location where we had the strongest onshore push and the greatest storm surge flooding east of Cameron. Now, in this particular case, there's that location about 50 miles east of the landfall location that got the 8.5 feet of storm surge flooding measured until the gauge failed. And then at Calcasieu Pass, they measured 5.5 feet. But in between here, just like in Laura, we didn't measure with gauges and observation systems every storm surge flooding location. We probably got above 10 feet. Somewhere in this area between these gauges, in an area where there are hardly any structures. We might not ever really be able to measure that directly. Just like in Laura, we had gauges that measured 13 feet and 9 feet, but in between there we had a structure, again, at the location where Delta made landfall today, but east of Laura's landfall location where we measured 17 feet of storm surge flooding. But because there aren't any structures hardly left after Laura, it's really going to be hard to know what storm surge flooding actually occurred. Now, as it moves inland, we've got power problems. You see the power outages mounting from southeast Texas through Lake Charles up into the Alexandria area, and that will expand farther and farther north, even though the strongest winds will be where it came ashore, and then it'll weaken as it goes inland. The gust factors over land are significant. You can have a sustained wind that's even below tropical storm force and get tropical storm force winds, and that is why you could have power outages perhaps all the way up into places like Memphis, Tennessee. And look at how gusty it is in places like Alexandria, gusty near 60 miles an hour, and that will be an inland location that gets power outages and damage. So, Justin, we've got a lot of problems in the Lake Charles area. We still have that flash flood emergency in effect till 1 a.m. local time, and there are a lot of homes that are getting threatened by water.
Yeah, in fact, Dr. Knabb, I want to bring in right now Charles Peak, who's in front of some of that flooding we're talking about, Dr. Knabb. Charles, we know we have your video up on the screen. We have your voice to tell us what you're seeing. What are you seeing?
Right here, Justin, this road, it's got about 6 to 8 inches. It looks more like a river because it's completely covering a 4-lane road here. But the good news that I can tell you is in this particular area, over the last hour, the water levels have gone down a little from what they were about an hour ago. So hopefully this flash flooding won't last too long and be as dangerous as it could be.
Well, and Charles, you and I have talked about this. We had lunch earlier today. We've had other meals talking about this. The dangers of floodwaters, even like you say, 6 or 8 inches, doesn't sound like a lot, does it? But there are dangers in that water. It's a good news you're one of the few and the proud out in this right now, because a lot of people either evacuated or are staying in. That is good news. But when you come across floodwaters, so many dangers present that you cannot see. Have you come across anything that you said, you know what, thank goodness I didn't drive through that, thank goodness we didn't have to interact with that?
Haven't run in the flooding situation, but coming down the road just a little bit ago, because it's dark out here, even though I've got extra lighting on here, I was right up on a power line, almost completely down over the road. And fortunately, because I'm going slow and have lights, I was able to stop. But it would be easy to hit something like that. I will tell you, Justin, since the last time we talked, there's a lot more people out now driving around and checking things out. So they really need to be careful. But
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's terrible to hear because this storm is nowhere near over. Winds are still gusting, just like Dr. Knabb, Charles said. You know, we're not done yet. We've got a long way to go. Now we're on the other side of the storm, and these winds are going to persist. The rain's going to let up, but we still have these hurricane-force winds, and it's the wind that can be a real problem here. We do have that flash flood emergency in effect. Turn around, don't drown. Don't find yourself in that water. Avoid it at all costs, especially at night. My goodness gracious, don't even think about driving through it. But we have these winds and all the debris that is left in Lake Charles after Hurricane Laura 43 days ago. Are you seeing any examples of that debris going airborne, being a problem? That can be deadly.
Yes, sir, Justin. I've seen a lot of especially the sheet metal that has been flying down the road and across the road. While you were talking there, I could see off to my left power flashes, obviously some lines going into each other, a transformer, but we still have strong wind gusts here, even though the sustained winds, like Dr. Knabb had talked about, has come down quite a bit. You're getting some very strong gusts it's still causing a lot of damage. Some of these trees have been able to sit in this flooded water now, and you get those gusts, you can bring trees down as well. So it's definitely not time to get out and be checking everything out after.
It's scary to hear, Charles, that people are starting to venture out. You hate to hear that. You know, it's just too soon. The storm's not over. I really, really hope people find themselves going back home and saying, you know what, it's dangerous out here, because it absolutely is dangerous. I can tell you, Charles, as you well know, our crew has a safety plan in effect. I am only a few feet away from my crew right now. I can get up those stairs and into the building at a moment's notice. You can find yourself out there, debris blowing around, floodwaters continuing to flow. That can be a deadly situation. Charles Peak, we really appreciate your time. Thank you. Be safe, my dear friend. We'll see you back here at the hotel at some point. And I'll tell you what, folks, as you go through this, it really is disappointing to hear that there are people out right now. Thankfully, tens of thousands of people did leave the area. They did evacuate before the storm, but we do know people stayed. And if you can hear the sound of my voice, if you can see the Weather Channel feed on an app or whatever it is you're using to stay in touch, being out right now is so dangerous, so dangerous. You can't see how deep water is, especially at night. You don't know what's in floodwaters if you do drive through it. I know Chris Warren, as we send it to Chris there in Alexandria. Chris, you know, you've covered these storms for years. This is the exact wrong thing to do, going out while the storm is still going through your area. Chris Warren, to you now in Alexandria.
Yeah, and Justin, you're bringing up a good point, too, because I was thinking that one of the saving graces is, as heavy as the rain is right now here in Alexandria, hopefully the saving graces is that the heaviest rain is going to be ahead of the storm and with the strong winds happening at night. Here in Alexandria, we're pretty much right in the middle of the state of Louisiana. The worst of the weather has been going on for about an hour or so, or maybe 2 hours now, and it's going to continue like this at least for another couple of hours, maybe longer depending on the track. We're the northern part of the center of the storm right now, but I was thinking that would be at least one thing, with flash flood warnings extending south of here about 80 to almost 100 miles, including flash flood warnings here in Alexandria, that I was hoping that people just wouldn't go out. And we've seen a few people come into the hotel where we are driving in, and the road here off into the darkness, I could tell that there's some pretty decent ponding on the roads with these sheets of rain. We talk about that, the waves of rain that come in. That is certainly what we're seeing right now, and we have been. So with the rain coming at me like this, the rain is coming between two hotels right now that are both generally oriented north and south. So that's one of the clues. We watch the rain as it's coming out of the northeast, really is the way it's coming in, kind of being funneled in almost a due northerly direction between these two buildings. What we're going to do as the storm, as Delta is that way, south, actually a little bit more that way, a little to the south and east of where I am, the center of it, we're seeing some of the heaviest rain right now, and will continue to do so going into the overnight hours, either shortly after midnight, could see some of the worst of the weather, or possibly a couple hours after that. So we have a few more hours to go as far as the rainfall goes. So getting up early in the morning and going out, there's likely to be some residual flooding with this, with the flooding that is already ongoing with the flash flood warnings. And then we got to talk about all this heading, the rain and the wind, about 2 miles away from where I am right now. The winds, the latest gust was around 53 miles an hour. But all this is heading up into the northeast part of the state, then into Arkansas and Dr. Nab, then into Tennessee, and we can't forget about parts of western Mississippi still have to deal with this. So the extent of the flash flood watch is continuing, flash flood warnings going on here through the overnight hours. What are you thinking, Dr. Nab, is going to be the biggest concern out of this during the overnight hours?
Well, Chris, I think it's going to be two main problems. One is the wind-induced power outages, and that can bring its own dangers. And where you are in Alexandria, you've been under a flash flood warning for a little while, and that has just been upgraded to a flash flood emergency. So that means with additional rains to come where you are, Chris, not only problems on the roads with flooding, but possibly, like we've seen farther south in the Lake Charles area, the possibility of some flooding starting to threaten some homes eventually. That's what the flash flood emergency is talking about, the risk of community-wide flooding.
And just driving around, Dr. Knapp, today, I could see evidence of Laura, still some debris piles around as well. And while no two storms are the same, and this one might not be as strong as it's coming through here, it still could be strong enough and coming in at a different angle that the winds could play a different role, could do something different than what we saw with Laura here in Alexandria. So that's something that I think is going to be interesting to watch too. Plus all of this rain and the serious flood threat that we're watching. What do you think beyond this, Dr. Knapp, going into Tennessee and beyond? I mean, this is, it's not going to be, you wake up in the morning and this is over. It'll be a different system in the morning. But what are you curious to see happen tomorrow?
Well, even up into a place like Memphis, Tennessee, there could be enough gustiness in the winds into tomorrow for there to be some spotty power outages. And then that problem, I think, starts to be less of an issue, but the rain-induced flooding could become more of a problem farther north and east. So increasingly, over the next day or so, the wind problem will get less and less, but the rain-induced flooding problem will continue. Let me show you the big picture here. Again, this is where Chris Warren is, where the gusts have occasionally been up to 60 miles an hour and still gusty right now to 45, and the backside of this is still very gusty in Lake Charles. Then, look at just the heavy rainfall. It is raining the heaviest in the Alexandria area, and because of the rain that's already fallen, they've had more than a foot, and now more heavy rain is coming. Flash flood emergency in the Alexandria area going all the way down I-49 to near Lafayette. That means community-wide, life-threatening flooding. You've got to stay off the roads, and if you're in trouble at your home, call 911.
Right now.
Our coverage of Hurricane Delta continues. I want to show you some of the new images that we've been getting here at the Weather Channel. Some damage from Jennings, Louisiana. You can see some of the lighter roofing materials there thrown across a yard and then also thrown across the road, which makes just one more hazard when you're out there at night. You don't know what's going to be in front of you when you had all this wind come through, and there has been at least some reports of structural damage. So our storm chaser here, Brett Adair, going around that, off-roading just a little bit. And then look at this, coming up against some trees and some power line issues. That road then becomes effectively impassable, as you don't know if those are live wires. You got trees blocking the rest of the way. You got to get the heavy machinery out to clear that up once the power crews come out and say that it's okay to be walking around and doing that. So things take a while to go back to normal after an event like this comes through. So that's the Jennings area. As shown to us from Brett Adair. This is from Chase Boyer, and look at this. That is a mobile home, the modular home there that is picked up, turned on its head, and is literally lying across the middle of the road. It's upside down. You can see some of the wheels back pointing towards the sky. The air conditioner and the roof are closer to the roadway. Gosh, these structures, these types of structures are not safe places to be when you have very strong winds, whether they're straight line winds because of a hurricane coming in, or tornadic winds can roll these features as well. Let's hope that nobody was in that home when this occurred, because that is not a ride you want to go on. That is for sure. Now, so we're starting to see some wind damage, right? We've seen some video of that kind of wind damage coming into us. We've also seen lots of water around. I want to show you what it's like out on the roads. Bringing in storm tracker Charles Peak right now. As Charles, you are bringing us these images that look like the middle of rivers, except there's streetlights in front of you. Where are you? How deep is that water?
Mark, right here, it's about 18 inches deep. It's a little deeper than just behind me. This is right near McNeese State University and not too far from the Bayou Contraband. So I'm not sure in this particular area if there's any overwash from that or if it's all freshwater, because there's been a ton of freshwater flash flooding. But needless to say, widespread road covering around here.
And I can see the water all over the roads there. There are some buildings off to the side. Can you tell if the water's going up against homes and businesses there also, or is that more just staying in the streets at this point?
It's going up, in some cases, up right into the businesses. A little earlier, I saw a few buildings that probably had a foot of water in them. At that time, that was businesses. I have not run across any homes that I've seen water getting into yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case.
Hey, Charles, how close are you to a body of water? You know, the river comes up all the way from the Gulf of Mexico, some 25 miles, and at the gauge there, they are measuring storm surge flooding of about 1.5 feet. So there's got to be a little bit of a water rise component here in addition to the freshwater flooding. But I don't know if you can tell kind of where the water has come from to get to this point.
Yeah, Dr. Knapp, I can't really tell you. Like I say, behind me about 1/2 mile is the Bayou Contraband, and so it would make sense that there would be some surge aspects to this, but being dark and not being able to see, I can't tie one to the other right now.
So that's Charles Peak. He's on the roads, surrounded by water at this point. Stay safe, Charles. Want to bring back Justin Michaels, who's been in Lake Charles as well. And as this center has gone through the Lake Charles area, or just east of Lake Charles, really, Justin, we're still seeing a lot of mixing from the upper levels of the atmosphere down to the surface. So all of a sudden, big squalls of wind have come through where you've been standing over the past several hours.
Is that okay? So there it is, the meteorological explanation as to what we're living through right now, Mark. It's incredible, really, because all of a sudden, you know, right now it's windy, but it's relatively calm compared to what it's like when these enormous gusts of wind come in, and it's one of those kinds of winds where you have to brace yourself because it's just coming and you feel like you're going to fall over. Well, those winds are not just going to potentially knock me over. What we keep seeing is explosions in the distance, bright explosions in the distance, continuing the power problems that are here. More than 350,000 customers in Louisiana without power right now. More than 100 and some odd thousand in Texas. We're getting close to 500,000 people without 500,000 customers without power here in because of Hurricane Delta. So the problems persist. We know it's going to be very difficult for people to continue to clean up after Laura. Now we have Delta. It's going to be so hard, but they're going to come back and start doing that good work. All right, so now we're going to send it right now to Alexandria, Louisiana. That's where we find our Chris Warren. And Chris, I know, yeah, it's windy here. How are conditions where you are right now, Chris?
Well, it's been pouring for a couple hours now, and it is still coming down. And the winds have been going up as well. The past couple of hours, the winds have been gusting stronger than 50 miles an hour, and the rain has been like this on and off. And when I say off, it goes down to heavy. It's very heavy right now, but then it goes down to just being heavy. And that's what's going to be going on for a while now. And rain is going to be the issue here in Alexandria. And I want to show you, there's a slope right here going out of the parking lot of this hotel. And there's a storm drain right there and a storm drain over here. And I think it is still accepting water, but barely. That's a ball right there and a plastic bottle that continues to kind of circle around and then come out again. So flash flood warning is currently in effect right now, and flash flooding does remain a huge concern right here in central Louisiana and heading up into the Northeast. Stay with the Weather Channel. Tracking Delta on the Weather Channel right now, and we will be overnight. I'm meteorologist Chris Warren here right in the middle of Louisiana in Alexandria, as this storm is bringing a lot of rain, heavy rain. Flash flooding is an ongoing concern and an ongoing right now threat. So hopefully people are home and where they should be. The wind has been gusting stronger than 50 miles an hour as well. And this is some of the stronger gusts we've seen. And I want to just kind of look up here at some of these lights here, these lights in the parking lot, to just kind of get an idea. And while we're looking at these lights right here, remember that going closer now to as this storm is making its north to slight northeasterly movement here into Louisiana. Again, I'm about roughly 115, 120 miles away from where this storm made landfall on the Louisiana coast, about 12 miles away from where Laura did. To the east, a Creole coming ashore is a Category 2, 100-mile-per-hour storm. Now, as this hurricane continues to march up, it will continue to lose its strength, but it is still going to bring tropical storm force winds during the overnight hours to so many people here across parts of Louisiana and the northeast part of the state, and then going into western Mississippi and Arkansas. Tropical storm warnings in effect. In fact, right here in Alexandria, Louisiana, we're on the farthest northern portion of the hurricane warnings that are still in effect. So while the rain is the obvious sight here with the flash flooding going on, the wind will still remain an issue and a concern with power outages possible. Even earlier, a few hours ago, I saw a report of some trees down northwest of where we are. So this is far from over, as hurricanes tend to be, even as they continue to go down in wind speed. Long after landfall, long into the night, these storms, including this one, will continue to cause a lot of problems, unfortunately, and make it very difficult for millions of people to get a good, restful sleep, including, of course, the people that are wondering what they're going to be going home to, whether it's tomorrow or whether it's in a couple of days, or those, Dr. Knapp, who, like in Lake Charles, have had to evacuate from Laura, and while their homes are not livable anymore, it's possibly going to be even longer now. So such a heartbreaking situation, while at the same time, we've still got this one. We've still got a lot of rain and a long night ahead of us.
Yeah, the evacuation situation for Lake Charles was kind of unique because most of the people who had to leave left because there wasn't safe wind sheltering, not so much that it was a storm surge issue, but so good that so many people did get out to stay in a safer place from wind, and because they're getting such widespread flooding tonight in Lake Charles, as well as where our Chris Warren is in Alexandria. And now we've got not only the gusty winds, 40, 50, near 60 miles an hour last few hours in Alexandria, it's starting to get gustier in very northern parts of Louisiana, and we've got a flash flood warning that's now been extended even north of Alexandria into the Winfield area, up I-49 even farther to the north. And then where our Chris Warren is, he's under a flash flood emergency. They've had over a foot of rain in some spots, and there's a lot more to come. So because of the volume of water that has fallen in the area, we're starting to get reports of problems. Here is one report of street flooding and road closure and vehicles getting stranded. Now, hopefully, those vehicles were just parked somewhere and people aren't stranded in those vehicles, but we got to stay off the roads tonight. Don't put yourself in danger, and don't make responders come out and have to rescue you. And even in the last hour, we've had more than 3 inches of rain locally. So it's coming down in buckets, and that's going to add to the flooding problem. Now, the rainfall rates are decreasing down in the Lake Charles area, but the damage proverbially and literally is already done. Look at the most recent updated report we've got in the Iowa area east of Lake Charles. Rainfall total now exceeding 17 inches. Oh my goodness, that's a lot of rain. And we're getting some reports of water in homes in the Iowa area. So this is getting real. Moss Bluff area north of Lake Charles, some water getting into some homes. So Justin Michaels, it has not been as much of a wind event as Laura was, but with the compromised structures, any additional wind is bad news. We've got the power outages, and we have water getting into homes mainly because of the heavy rainfall.
Yeah, that is all bad news, and I know we still have some more time to go. I know, hopefully, Dr. Knapp, I guess by tomorrow morning, and people start to make the trek back here to assess the damage, the storm will have been pushed off to the north and east. But right now, for the people who are out, and we do know from our own Charles Peak, people have decided to venture out of their homes, and it really is a scary proposition. You're really taking your own lives into your hands when you do that, because of the dangers that present with not just floodwaters. You don't know if there are drainage holes that are drains that are completely exposed. You don't know if the road is washed away, but also the winds that are continuing to whip through Lake Charles, Louisiana. Going out right now is not the best idea. Now, I will tell you, and we've been talking about this for a while, and the problems that persist related to power, we're approaching the 500,000 mark of customers without power. That's remarkable. Between Louisiana, where the most customers are without, but also Texas. But we keep seeing explosions off in the distance of probably, transformers or whatever it might be. It's dangerous here, folks, as Delta continues to push through.
So we're watching a bit of a collection of some of the sites that our storm tracker Charles Peak encountered over the past several hours going in and around the Lake Charles area. We talked about how many tarps, how many plastic layers there have been on the roofs around the Lake Charles area because of Laura, things that weren't all put together yet. Now we have another hit, and you can see debris on the roads. You can see those plastic coverings flapping in the wind. Your heart goes out to these people, right? You just probably got through the whole insurance ordeal, and now you're going to have new claims, start that whole thing over again. It is going to slow the process of recovery down considerably. So again, we're showing you kind of a loop of some of the things that we've been seeing around Lake Charles. Let's show you what we're seeing now around the Lake Charles area as well. The roads are wet. We've seen some areas that are completely covered in water by, inches up to a foot. Big cars like what Charles is in getting through okay, although he's not going through the worst of the areas either. And then, round after round after round of streets that are just impassable. He said earlier there were several areas where the water was right up against homes and businesses in the area. Let's bring back Justin Michaels, also in Lake Charles. Justin, very interesting what you've been talking about kind of across the water there, seeing the different sections of power going out. And this is after the worst of the rain has come through.
Well, yeah, it's interesting to see it. In fact, in the last 20 minutes, we've seen a couple more, these enormous explosions that happen, like this blue, green, purplish light that it just engulfs the entire sky. And that we keep seeing it over there. Those are all oil refineries back there. That's a big part of the economy down here in Louisiana. So we're not quite sure what's causing those explosions, but I have to believe it's probably a function of the intense winds that continue to pick up and also the rain that's coming down. Basically, in total, it's Delta continuing to push through to the northeast. Now we're on the backside of the storm, but still we're getting these incredible gusts of wind that are very dangerous, very dangerous. We know there's flooding happening. Mark Elliott was talking about that. We know Charles Peak is seeing it with his own eyes, documenting it as he's driving around very carefully to see what's going on in Lake Charles, because so many people did evacuate. They're going to be coming back, and what are they coming back to? Probably going to be a lot of down power lines, down power poles, debris all over the place, corrugated metal that's been blowing all over the place. It's going to be another dangerous situation, not dissimilar from what they just lived through 6 weeks ago, 43 days ago, and what that was Hurricane Laura. Now we have Delta, and they have to do it all over again. So, with the light of day tomorrow, we'll be able to really assess what's going on, what people are going to have to do to clean up again, to really get their lives back moving again. But it's not just Lake Charles, Louisiana. Alexandria, Louisiana, also a town that's playing cleanup and catch up after Laura and now Delta, Chris Warren. Such a tough blow for the people here in Louisiana as the 2020 hurricane season moves on.
Yeah, and this storm Delta is moving on through Louisiana. I'm about in the center of the state as you can possibly be here in Alexandria, about 120 miles from the coast, from landfall, and this is what we're dealing with. Hours of rain so far, and we've still got some hours to go, and the wind as well. Latest wind gusts up around 59 miles an hour here. We feel the gusts a little bit. We're somewhat protected. We're on the south side of a building, but every once in a while we'll feel the wind gusts come around. And there's a flash flood emergency, by the way, here. Not by the way, this is actually a really big thing. It's a really big deal. In fact, there's a flash flood emergency. Flash flood warning means that, of course, flash flooding is ongoing, but flash flood emergency just taking it up another notch here, with the radar estimating several inches of rain, parts of Evangeline and Rapides parishes. And this is a very dangerous, possibly life-threatening situation if you were to go out. And what I mean by that, just look at this parking lot right here. And it's a wet parking lot, right? That's what it looks like. And it is. It's extremely wet. And you see the wind pushing these huge raindrops. And I was looking over here, and I noticed that car looks like it's got some water pretty high, and then all of a sudden I'm in ankle deep water. Goes down probably about 6 inches. This white car over here has water that's going up just to the baseboard there. And if it goes up any higher, I don't think it will go too much higher just looking around. But, you know, another couple of inches on that car, it's going to start sneaking into that car. But what I mean by the danger of this now that it's night is that just from an eye's look, from up here, and just seeing that there are cars there, I otherwise would not have known that was actually 6 inches of water, because it just looks like a continuation of a soaked, waterlogged pavement here at a hotel. And this is why it's that standing water that you just don't see, why it's particularly dangerous when the flash flooding happens at night and you're out in it. Now, hopefully people are going to, you know, if you can get some sleep with the wind howling stronger than 50 miles an hour, the gusts have been, you know, going 50 miles an hour or stronger for hours now. And we're hoping that people are going to stay off the roads, because once this gets through, we should be in pretty good shape. It's not going to linger with the heavy rain. We just got to get through the night here. Now, during the day tomorrow here in Alexandria, central Louisiana, we could see more thunderstorms and some showers, but by the afternoon, that'll be more hit and miss. And then on Sunday, we're going to be back to a steamy Louisiana with temperatures back into the upper 80s. But we still have a long night ahead of us. That's why we're here at the Weather Channel, to walk you through the threats to come. And this one is moving off to the northeast, and the flash flooding threat with it. Stay with the Weather Channel for the latest on Delta.
Putting adventure first.
Brand new advisory in from the National Hurricane Center on Delta. It's still a hurricane. Even though these systems make landfall, they don't just go away. This is still producing maximum sustained winds of 75 miles an hour. And so we've still got hurricane warnings along the coast. It's going to take a little more time for this to spin down and for those hurricane force winds in the coastal areas, and with some very strong gusty winds to lighten up as this moves northward. So still a Category 1 hurricane, moving north-northeast at 15 miles an hour. So it came ashore, moving along at 15 miles an hour. But as we feared, the rain rates are so high that we're still getting flash flood emergencies. So much for a moving along hurricane not being an inland flood threat. It's definitely still producing that kind of problem, and it's mostly front loaded. But the backside is still windy, even though it's not as rainy. Now let's take a look at the new track and intensity forecast, and this will be an update that comes out every 6 hours, right? It's 11 p.m. Eastern time and 10 p.m. Central time, and it's going to weaken pretty quickly in terms of the sustained winds. So right now, it's a hurricane. It'll be a tropical storm before too much longer. All it has to do is come below 74 miles an hour. And then tomorrow morning, breakfast time, this will be still a tropical storm, if this forecast is exactly right, all the way up into northeastern Louisiana. And then we have a tropical depression and something losing its tropical characteristics as it goes through northern portions of Mississippi and into Tennessee. But increasingly, this will become mainly a rain problem. But remember that the sustained winds are just that, sustained winds. The gusts can be a good bit stronger than that. So we still have the hurricane warnings up along the coastline from High Island over to Morgan City. Now, we'll have to see if some of the local forecast offices do any shaving off or changes of these inland warnings, but for the time being, along the coast, that hurricane warning is still up. And this is kind of an update on where Delta is and where it has been as compared to Laura. Made landfall earlier this evening, about 12 miles east of the landfall location of the center of Laura. And interestingly, ironically, the location of the landfall of the center of Delta is the location where we had the maximum storm surge just to the east of where the landfall of Laura was in Cameron. So just 12 miles difference makes a world of difference in terms of where the maximum storm surge occurs. In the case of Delta, the maximum surge was probably somewhere out here in a very sparsely populated area east of Creole and west of Pecan Island, but this area still got 8 or 10 feet of storm surge flooding all the way out to 50 miles east of there, even into Vermilion Bay and up into Abbeville. So, Mark, as we anticipated, this